So you're a huge fan of tabletop games and you've decided to design your own game. That is awesome. You should all do it. Gaming is amazing. It's super fun to make games. It's a lot of work though, right? You're cutting out cards, you're putting stickers on dice, getting your friends to play, and now you're going to show it to a publisher. Don't blow it. Hi, my name is Luke Peterschmidt, and I have been in the tabletop gaming industry for more than 20 years now. I've been a designer, I've been a publisher, I've owned my own business, I've been a brand manager, I've been an executive, I've done a lot of different things and I've seen a lot of different things. One of the things I think I've learned during that time are the 7 things you should not say when you're pitching your game to a publisher. Number 1, I design worlds, not games. Okay, here's the thing. You sat down in front of that publisher, and that publisher is thinking they're talking to a game designer. And you're probably a game designer. Very few people design worlds as a job. You know, people like who write comics or make movies or role-playing game designers, but you're a tabletop game designer. The second you tell a publisher that you're more proud of your world than your game is the moment they think you don't care about your game mechanics enough. If you think your game has an interesting world attached to it, there are ways to communicate that. You just say something like, and by the way, the world in my game is also very interesting. Done. If they ask you questions, obviously answer them, but they think they're talking to a game designer, be a game designer. Number 2, my game gets really good with expansions. When you say, my game gets better with expansions, what the publisher hears is my game isn't as good as it should be right now. You don't need to stress that your game can have expansions. It should be obvious from the design that it will accept them or not. But never pitch it as my game is better with expansions than it is right now. Focus on the game in front of you, not the game in front of you after you've added a few expansions to it. Number 3, I made this Star Wars game. You should go get the Star Wars license. Getting what we call AAA licenses, the really top shelf licenses, Star Wars, Game of Thrones, is an incredibly big decision for a game company. It's very strategic, very long term, and again, very expensive. Almost no publisher is going to take a random game submission and then decide to go spend the millions of dollars it would take to acquire that license. Next up, I'm making a role-playing game for people who don't like role-playing games. When you say you're making a role-playing game for people who don't like role-playing games, you're kind of missing the point. Categorizing games is useful, and it's useful for the customer. If I told you I'm making a bus for people who only drive cars, that's crazy. That person's never going to go to the bus store. They're going to go to the car store. If I say I'm making a card game for people who don't like card games, that's silly. They don't like card games. Expanding what a genre can do is fine, but pitching it in a way that you're saying, I'm making a product for people who don't buy that type of product is a loser every time. Next up, my game fixes what's wrong with Magic the Gathering. Okay, so in this last one, you can replace Magic the Gathering with Dungeons and Dragons, Settlers of Catan, Warhammer 40,000, right? Any big, huge hit. There is nothing wrong with those games that needs to be fixed. They're huge, huge hits. The publisher you're telling this to would probably give their left arm to publish any of those games. If you want to reference an existing game as you talk about your own, that's fine. In fact, I think you should. So if you're making a tabletop miniatures game and you reference 40K, that's great, right? And you can use 40K to show how your game is different. But you should never say that your game fixes what's wrong with Warhammer 40K. It just makes you look like an amateur. Next up, you can use my game, but you have to use my art too. In a meeting with the publisher, your goal is to get that publisher to say yes, one time, to one question. Will you publish my game? Yes. The second you say you have to use my art as well, you're trying to get them to say yes twice. And I'm telling you, it's hard enough to get them to say yes once. There's a chance that the publisher might say, this design is great. What the designer doesn't know is I signed a license and this game design is perfect for it. Or the publisher might be thinking, I need a sci-fi game and this is a fantasy game. Or zombies are no good anymore, but this could be a good World War I game. Whatever the case, give the publisher that freedom. Let them take your game and put whatever art they want on it. If you make great art and you want to make it available, tell them the art is available as well. The one carve out I'd make here is if you happen to be working with like a really world-class artist, someone whose name brings customers in. If you're making a game with Braum and Braum is making all of your art, yeah, you probably want to say, and by the way, this Braum art is available. But it has to be not just a good artist or a great artist, but an artist with a name. Last up, games are expensive, but my game is cheap. This phrase makes you look like you don't understand business at all. Games are not too expensive. If games were too expensive, people wouldn't buy them. One of my favorite early gaming moments was hanging out at a Games Workshop store and hearing a customer complain about how Games Workshop was ripping them off because now their game was $65, as the customer was handing over $65 to the cashier. What did the cashier actually hear? Blah, 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 blah. Here's my $65. Games are not too expensive. Now, if you make a game that is inexpensive to produce, that's fair, and you can tell the publisher that. You can say, my game is inexpensive to produce, as it is now. And that publisher may want to have a low-cost game, or they may want to take your game and upgrade all of the components. Replace some of your chits with 3D counters and all sorts of fun stuff. Because they might want to make a more expensive game. I'll be doing a video later about how cost of games affects both publishers and designers. But for now, the thing to know is let your publisher set the price of your game. So that's a wrap on the 7 things you shouldn't say to a game publisher. I'm working on another video right now called The Things You Should Say to a Game Publisher. If you're getting ready to pitch, be sure to watch that one as well. Thanks everybody for watching, and keep making great games.